Welcome back. Now, hopefully you've adjusted those force parameters so that you're breaking these pots exactly how you want them broken. Now, once that's configured the way you want it, we'd like to actually play some sounds. And we know how to do this in C++. We know about gameplay statics and play sound at location. And that's something we could do from C++. But sometimes you might be on a development team where you have some designers and they may wish to add some of those more designer type gameplay mechanics on the blueprint side, while you still have C++ functionality on the C++ side. Now, we've implemented this interface in Breakable Actor. Breakable Actor now inherits from iHitInterface, and we have this getHit function, and we have the ability to do something in C++ here. Now, we could easily get gameplay statics and play a sound here at the location of the impact point, but what if your sound designer wanted the choice of deciding what sound to play when an item gets broken? So they may wish to go into your breakables folder, open your BP breakable, and right here they'd want to be able to play some sounds when that getHit function gets called. But this is not a blueprint callable function. We can't just search for getHit here. Even though this class implements the interface, that function is not exposed to Blueprint. In fact, if we go into hitinterface.h, we can see that it's right here. It's not even a U function, it's just a C++ function. Now, we could make it a Blueprint implementable event, but that means it would only be implemented in Blueprint, and then we wouldn't be able to have our own C++ functionality triggered as a result of this function being called. So, how do we get the best of both worlds? Well, to do that, we could make this function a Blueprint native event. A Blueprint native event allows us to have C++ functionality and Blueprint functionality. We get the best of both worlds. And we definitely want C++ functionality. We have our enemy class that implements hitInterface, which has its own override of the getHit function. So we're doing things here in getHit related to our directional hit react. So it's very important that we still have the ability to implement getHit on the C++ side as well. So I'm going to go ahead and dock enemy.cpp right there. So we still have it open. And I'll go back to hitInterface and scroll down to this function getHit. Now, getHit can be a Blueprint native event. And to make that happen, we simply need to give it a U function macro and give it the specifier Blueprint native event. Now, as soon as we make this a Blueprint native event, it's now going to be implementable in Blueprints as an event, just like Blueprint implementable event. The only difference is it now has two versions. It has a C++ version and a version we can implement in the Blueprint. Now, as soon as we made this a Blueprint native event, we can no longer mark this as virtual. In fact, we don't even need this equals 0. That's something that we would put in a regular C++ project, but in Unreal Engine, it's going to handle all this for us. There's no need to use that equals 0 there. So this is no longer technically marked virtual, but it is overridable. But we have to implement it in a specific way. So what happens behind the scenes now is that Unreal Engine is going to create a C++ specific version of this that we can override, which is virtual, but getHit itself is going to be implementable in Blueprints. Now that C++ specific version that is virtual is the same function with implementation added to the name. So here's what we have to do. We have to go to enemy.h, and of course we see red squiggles because getHit is not a virtual function. But because we marked it as Blueprint native event, we can override the implementation, which is internally generated when we created the Blueprint native event. So this is now going to be called getHit implementation, and this is the C++ specific version. So we have to go into enemy.cpp, and this has to be getHit implementation. And the same goes for Breakable Actor. This is now going to be getHit implementation now. And in breakableactor.cpp, this is also the getHit implementation for the C++ version of this function. Now, I mentioned that you can simply call this getHit function from C++. Now, that's not 100% true. We have to execute that function a little differently with Blueprint native events. So let's go into weapon.cpp and take a look at where we're actually calling getHit. And we're doing it here after we've done our box trace if we have a valid actor. Now, we can't just call this function directly anymore. We now need Unreal Engine's reflection system to handle this interface a little differently for us. And to do that, we take the hit interface, and instead of calling getHit, notice we now have this execute getHit. So this was created for us when we compiled with Blueprint native event on this function. And notice it takes two things. It takes an object and it takes the actual input parameter. So it needs to know the object to execute this event on, both for the C++ and the Blueprint. And the object is going to be the hit actor. That's going to be boxHit.getActor. So we can pass that in to execute getHit, and then we have our boxHit.impactPoint that we're passing in there. So just something to keep in mind with Blueprint native events. When we call them from C++, we actually execute them with this auto-generated execute function that handles making sure the Blueprint event for it is fired off. So we can remove this direct call to getHit, and now we're executing getHit. So that's how Blueprint native events work. Essentially, this makes one function which is implementable in Blueprints, and another hidden function with implementation added to the name, and that we can implement in C++. We can do anything we like here. Enemy does its own thing here for directional hit reacts, but we also can implement this in Blueprint. So I have my editor closed down. I'm going to go ahead and compile this. And now with the successful compile, I'm going to launch the editor. So I've got the editor back up. I'm going to click Open to get my BP Breakable back. And right here in the event graph, I'm going to right-click and I'm going to search for getHit. And now we have the event, getHit. And we have this little icon here. That's the icon for an interface. So this is telling us that this is an interface function we've inherited from the hit interface. And this event will be fired off as soon as getHit is called in C++. And I mentioned that there are two versions. This is one version, and that underscore implementation is the other version. And if we want that version to be called, we do need to actually call it. And we do that by right-clicking on the event, and we select Add Call to Parent function right here. And the parent version of this getHit is the C++ version, so we can simply hook in the execution wire as well as that impact point. And now this will ensure that the C++ version is called as well. Now we don't have to go and implement this in the enemy class if we don't want to. If I grab a weapon and I come up and hit an enemy and I can swing my sword, and we still get that functionality. That's the C++ functionality causing that directional hit react. So it's not until we actually implement that event in the Blueprint that we have to manually call the C++ version of it. Now, we have this in our breakable, which we're not really doing anything with. We're just calling the C++ version, which also does nothing. But we can now do some of the game designer type stuff here in the event graph, such as play a sound. Now, we need a sound to play, don't we? So that's going to be something that we'll set up in the next video. We'll get some sound assets and we'll play the sounds there and make sure that we get a nice smashing pot break. Great job. I'll see you soon.